Hello, and welcome to Dope Conversations, and I am your host, Hbcus. Thank you for coming out to see what we have to talk about. Hopefully we'll give you something to think about. Today we are going to be talking about how to move HBCUs post-pandemic and still stay relevant and competitive with other institutions. So today I have our guest, Rochelle, and she is a political science major, and then I also have our guest, Caleb, and he is a computer engineer major, and I'm glad to have their student voices. But we also have Dr. Goodwin from our history department here at PVAMU, and he is going to share his research with us today. Before we jump in, though, we're going to go to commercial break, and then we'll dive right into our topic. Welcome back, and thank you for rejoining us. Dr. Goodwin, first of all, thank you so much for coming.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh yeah, you have skills that I needed to talk about this topic today. I know that you're preparing for a conference in Austin on the 1st, and I knew that you had already been doing some of the work, and that's why I wanted you here today.
Sure,
so my first question for you is this. What has the research shown about HBCUs and the future of HBCUs post-pandemic?
That's something that I think folks are still grappling with. Depending on what news outlet that you may listen to, the pandemic is still with us. Mm-hmm. So a post-pandemic world, what will that really look like?
Right.
But I think for HBCUs, a lot of folks, a lot of students came home, mm-hmm. and with their parents, they are choosing schools that may be closer to home.
Right.
And there is this racial awareness within the last few years. And those students who may not have considered an HBCU before, they're giving HBCUs second, third look. So I think the future is pretty good. Mm-hmm. HBCUs are ready, mm-hmm. as always, and it's going to be a new world.
I'm glad you mentioned about the race issue. Some experts have said that not only are we living in a COVID pandemic, but we're also living in a race pandemic. And that is an attraction for a lot of African American students, minority students too, to come to an HBCU. The distance, the closeness to an HBCU is also a reason, and that brings me to you, Caleb. I know a little bit about your story and how you ended up at PV, but can you share with our audience, how did you end up at PV?
Well, it's basically a long story. It kind of started from, well, actually, I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure if you probably graduated in 2020 or if some other students that's in my class graduated in 2020, but I know that starting with me personally, I was a part of the class of, I'd say, the most unfortunate, sadly, people in my school year, let's say 2020, we didn't really get the chance or the experience that normal high school seniors would basically supposed to have coming out of high school.
Right, because that also had to change a part of your college career. Because what school were you originally supposed to go to?
Originally, I got accepted to 2 schools, actually. Mm-hmm. I got accepted to Xavier University in Louisiana, and I got accepted into Howard.
Okay.
And Howard, I wanted to do biology at first, and I was, getting ready. I was excited because, that's a big school. For Howard, that's considered the Harvard.
The Mecca.
Basically, we call it the Harvard of
yes.
HBCU.
Mm-hmm. So
it was a big offer for me, and I was really excited to go down there, but once the pandemic hit, it basically changed everything for me. And on top of that, we're not only just looking at, a pandemic that has some virus, and it's more than like quarantine.
Right.
So we're just looking at the quarantine and the price of school, like
exactly.
tuition.
Exactly. So being closer, like you just stated, is an option for a lot of students mm-hmm. that's saying, okay, well, prior to the pandemic, I was going to go away I was going to go away. But now, out-of-state tuition and not knowing what I'm really going to have as far as class, because why am I paying out-of-state tuition for a face-to-face class when I'm going to be on Zoom?
And a lot of families were having to have that serious conversation because the pandemic did disrupt family economics. So, you know, it was a consideration.
Right, exactly. Rochelle, what about you?
I was fortunate enough to graduate before the pandemic hit. I'm class of 2019 from my high school, And what brought me to Prairie View was that my high school experience had been, you know, shaped through like a Caucasian lens, and I hadn't really had the opportunity to be surrounded by Black excellence and Black academia. So I actually did not apply to any in-state schools. I'm from California.
Okay.
So the thought of going to an HBCU, being surrounded by Black scholars, people who are looking to study, you know, things through a Black lens was really appealing to me. And in terms of the financial aspect, Prairie View was generous enough with the scholarship, so I was like, I'm on my way to Texas.
Well, welcome to Texas.
Yes, thank you. It's been nice.
And I think those things are very important when we think in terms of HBCUs and if we're still relevant. That is something that I'm researching right now, and I think a lot of scholars are looking at, okay, why do we still need HBCUs in this time? And I think we've touched on some of those topics just briefly. The cost of tuition.
Yes.
We are comparably 30% lower than our counterparts. When you think about racial relevance, the culture, those things you get here at a HBCU. So I think those things keep us relevant. But what strategies do you think HBCUs need to consider to remain competitive? No, because those things are important, but how do we keep staying a research too? Because we just made research too.
You know, the importance on research and development is part of academia. So you really can't get away from that. But one thing that has made HBCUs what they have been is the connection that the faculty will have with the students.
Yes.
And there's something about that dynamic. A lot of students didn't get that in K through 12. So most, without, you know, don't want to criticize the football coach or anything, but most students don't see a Black instructor, Black male instructor, unless he's wearing sweatpants and he's got a whistle around his neck.
Right.
So to come here and then to see that, that's a different dynamic. Now, for some folks, it's the same. It's what they expect. For others, it becomes different because they've never heard that male voice before.
Right.
And to hear that male voice and to hear that expectation, that this is what I expect from you.
Yes.
This is what you need to do.
Yes.
Because look at where you are. You are now part of something that is much bigger than you know coming in as a freshman. And so during that time, we try to encourage that.
And that goes back to, Rochelle, which something you said, your normal academic environment was not this.
Right.
So how have you thrived, or what's your experience in an all-Black institution? Well, not all-Black, but HBCU.
I have to be honest, initially it was a culture shock. Not only being, you know, now surrounded by a largely Black student body, but just moving to the South in general, there was an adjustment. But ultimately, I think it allowed me to really explore my Blackness more, what it means to be Black and a scholar, you know, and to not feel like an outlier outside, you know, within my classrooms, and to have professors like Dr. Goodwin was saying, who were rooting for me in a way that I hadn't had in my K through 12 experience.
That's good. Caleb, what about your experience? I know you had mentioned that you were considering 2 other HBCUs. So what was your reason for wanting to go to an HBCU?
Well, mainly, if I want to, I can actually start with PV. My main reason for starting with PV, because for me and my family specifically, PV, the culture, the people, the environment here, it's a tradition. And like I said, probably multiple times before when I've introduced myself, when I go to classes or whenever you have introduction day, I would always introduce, I'd say, man, they'd ask me, like, what brought you to PV? And I'd say, hey, it's, you know, I have a ton of alumni. For my family, most specifically my mom's side, it's a tradition just to go here and experience that culture of people that you most likely been around your whole life. For PV, it's like a small town. It's a small world. And on this campus, I feel like I'm more likely to see people that I've most likely grown up with, people that's in my bloodline, because for me, it starts all the way down from my great-grandfather. Early as 1800s, going from the great-granddad to grandmother, cousins, aunties, all the way to my sister-in-law, who's actually about to graduate. She's in nursing school right now.
Oh, good.
Her name is Kira, and she's about to graduate from nursing school along with my brother, who's in pharmacy at TSU. So I'm actually proud of that. That's something I personally get to represent, and that's a part of me that I feel like I should openly express and embrace.
Okay. So from a student's perspective, Greshel, what would it take to get another person from California to go to an HBCU? Post-pandemic, everything is going, we've adjusted, we found our new normal. How do we keep this momentum?
Oh, you know, I think it really has to do with breaking down this belief that some people have about HBCUs, that they are a lesser institution.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are people walking around thinking, oh, if you go to an HBCU, it's not preparing you for the real world, which is not the case.
Right.
And also just highlighting that what you get from an HBCU is unlike what you would get from a PWI. And it's often in so many ways something that a lot of Black students across the country and really globally are looking for in their educational experience.
Yeah, that's good. Dr. Goodwin, now from the admin point of view, the professor's point of view, what do you think we need to keep the momentum? What does the HBCU have to do to remain a research 2, but even move up to a research 1?
It starts with research, being proficient in your field from an academic standpoint. But one of my concerns is that I don't want to lose that connection with students. And that becomes the challenge.
Yeah.
That I've got to do more research, but I still want to maintain that hook. That is what has made this institution in particular successful for all these years.
Right.
And that is why generation after generation, students will come back and say, well, my uncle went here.
Yes.
My aunt went here, my parents went here. So, and when you see that, when you feel that, that is what makes, it's a tangible feeling. It is like being at home.
Yes, and that's that informal mentoring that only an HBCU can provide. It provides that lunch lady in the cafeteria that might slide you another piece of meat because you're not eating. The lady in the bookstore putting back that last book because you coming because you're a computer engineer major. Those are things that you get at a HBCU that you can't get at a campus that has 60,000 people. So when, not that those campuses are bad, but when you're talking about suiting the needs of students, you have to consider all types of students. And we have a special population here at PV and across HBCUs that quite often is not considered at other institutions.
That's unfortunate, because we would like to think 50 years after the Civil Rights Movement that the playing field, the quote-unquote playing field, is accessible and equitable to everybody. Sometimes that's not the case.
Correct.
So there are still institutions that are not as welcoming to students of color as we would think in our society.
Yeah.
And of course, students of color can thrive and succeed in any environment. We know that.
Right.
But it's that environment that says, what are you doing here?
Right.
And will do, maybe consciously or unconsciously, make it an uninviting place.
That is so true.
So that you're not comfortable.
And I think if anybody is watching this show, can you please tell the so-called experts, we have discovered the reason why HBCUs are still relevant so they can stop looking and stop trying to close us down and just help us stay open. So my last question to you is, what is it, or how can the community join forces with HBCUs to help us continue this momentum?
Now that's going to be tricky because a lot of alumni from HBCUs will have this opinion, this belief that I want my children to be better, to have different opportunities than I did. So even though they may have graduated from an HBCU, they now want their children to go somewhere else. And what that is unconsciously saying is that I want you to be better. And being better means going to a different school, as if to say that the school that prepared them
And got them to their elevation was not good enough. That's a good point. And I think that's something we need to consider as alumni of HBCUs. We have to be more involved in patting our HBCUs on the back, speaking about the goodness of HBCUs and our experiences. We are walking resumes for
Yes.
HBCUs. When you talk about Stacey Abrams, HBCU product. Our vice president, HBCU product. But the sad thing is, and I find sad in that, most people did not know that until they were running for something.
Right, right.
Those things need to be shout from the mountaintop, and I think those are ways that the community can help. When you have attended an HBCU, wear it as a badge of honor and let everybody know.
Right.
We're gonna go to a commercial break and we'll come right back and finish up. Thank you. Welcome back. We're going to continue with this same question about how can the community join forces with the HBCUs so we can keep this momentum that we have currently. And I want to hear from my young adults, because y'all are our future leaders. We're going to sit back and we're going to be watching y'all lead the world. So what would you do?
You know, I think it comes down to continuing to uplift the HBCU culture. As alumni, keep coming to the events, tell your kids about the events, tell your neighbors about the events, and invest in your HBCU, not even just monetarily, but your time, your energy. Post on social media for us, come out to our events, you know, just continue to be an active member to keep that culture flourishing.
I like that. That's great, because just imagine if our successful alumni came back and did some type of mentorship with our current students and could help them as far as professional careers that they're about to go into. That would be so impactful. And I think that is a great idea. Coming back, being involved, pay your alumni dues. We need them.
That's true. That is right. That is
But
right.
also your time, your encouragement, your mentorship. All of that is very necessary for us to propel forward. Caleb, what about you? What are your suggestions?
I want to personally say, like everybody else been saying, it starts from the house. It starts from the family, from the ground up, from your grassroots. Like, there's people, like, going off what Mr. Goodwill said, there's people whose parents went to HBCUs. My mother went to PV. She graduated from PC. She went back and got her master's at PV. And even still, she did only recommend it once, but she wanted me to go somewhere better. Whenever I want to go to HBCU, like TSU or Morehouse, they like, nah, Caleb, you should go somewhere better. You should probably, look at your grades. You got so much high grades and you went to a 6A school, but you want to go to such a low school like that just to follow some tradition? Come on now.
So what did you say to that?
And I said, no, I just want to go. So I said, Mom, I understand you probably want a better education for me. You want me to find something that's a better opportunity. But personally, for my whole life, or at least since I was in 4th grade, I've been around this environment of just where it's just culturally mixed. And it's just I'd say predominantly white environment. And there was nothing bad like that. There was nothing hindering me like that. It's just something I've been around for quite a while. Probably growing up, it was basically my childhood.
Right.
And knowing my parents, my family members, it was basically, like I said, a tradition for them to go and experience the HBCU experience, like here at PV.
So do you feel now that the education that you've been getting is less than?
I feel like it's much more engaging compared to what I've been, especially what they teach at PWIs. It's a lot more engaging. There's more culture involved. There's more spirit involved. There's more. It's a lot more patriotism towards, the black cause, the black cultureism, trying to embrace that part of you, trying to understand that that is who you are, and that you can spread that word, and that everybody else can have the same opportunity you have. That's good.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm not even gonna lie, I was a little scared to ask that question because that was like, whoo, you better hope he say the right thing. But yes, I think when we think about HBCUs, they offer all the things that we've been talking about today. And I think we just have to do more about spotlighting and highlighting those things that are positive. And where else can you go to learn more about yourself, learn the things that you're supposed to learn in the industry that you're going to learn it in, but be culturally aware. And we're not really getting that at some of the secondary schools. So this is important for us to get that information. So Dr. Goodwin, tell me anything that you're working on coming up that we can keep up with you and follow your work?
Well, there's a conference next week.
Okay.
It will be on the campus of Houston-Tillotson in Austin. And it is an opportunity, perhaps the first opportunity, for all of the 9 Texas HBCUs to come together and kind of discuss some issues. But this may be the first, but it won't be the last.
Right.
So we're going to try to develop a way to create our own future from within.
I'm excited about that conference myself. For those of you who do not know, it's in Austin at Houston-Tillotson, and it's talking about the civic responsibilities of HBCUs. And we're going to have all your brainiacs there from all 9 HBCUs in Texas, and we're going to really sit down and think of ways that we can propel HBCUs forward, but also bring back the disenchantment in democracy. We fell out of love with democracy. And we need to be just as involved now as ever. And it's very important that if we don't have a seat at the table, to get there. And that means we need to support the confirmation of Judge Jackson, because we need other judges like her to be there. So I ask you to tune in next week. We're going to have Dr. Lisa K. Thompson speaking to us about leading through a crisis. So next Thursday, 4 o'clock. PVAMU TV, or you can go to my channel on YouTube, Bikita Pegram. But please follow and subscribe to any of my social media on Twitter, Instagram at Bikita Pegram, and I look forward to reading your comments and learning more about your thoughts and your concerns. And if you have a show idea, please give it to us, and we'll be ready to comment and look at your idea and maybe have you on the show to talk about. Where can they get in touch with y'all, or how can they follow some of your work?
Well, if you would like to follow me, I have a username. I probably don't want to disclose over air. I might have to change it up a little bit. I need to get more professional with it, but I know if you want to follow me, I basically have nothing to provide, but I am going to take this opportunity to start getting more active, probably start showing my work a little more.
Good.
So if you do want to follow me on social media, any type of way, I will gladly let you know personally. Probably not over there because it's not professional, but I'm gonna keep it honest. I'm gonna keep it real, and I'm gonna try to step things up from here on out.
So how about they leave you a comment, you'll answer the comment on YouTube.
Yes.
How about that?
I like that.
All right. So, go ahead.
As for me, I don't have any social media either at the moment, but you can connect with me on LinkedIn always.
There you go.
I started a blog on Medium, so you could find me at Grachel Jean-Philippe on medium.com. And stay tuned for my upcoming project with a podcast called the Young, Gifted, and Black Podcast.
Yeah,
right.
that's what I'm talking about. Doing those positive things to get our voices out. Great job. And since you mentioned podcasts, the Dope Conversations podcast is coming back for a second season. It will air on April 22nd. And we hope to see you then. And Dr. Billy Hawkins for UOH will be the first guest. We thank you for tuning in. Continue coming back to see us every Thursday at 4. And check in. Keita out.